All right. Welcome on to the Tortillas and Takes podcast. You are on once again with your boy, Albie Shore. I am back. My bubble guts did not get the victory this week. I'm back to hosting. Jeremy's able to let his hair down. Joe is looking as cool as ever. So that's right. We have everybody here. Of course, your boy Albie. We got the Red Raider expert himself, Joe Lopez, starting us off. What's going on, Joe?
Albert. We missed you the last interview, but glad your stomach is feeling a whole lot better. And finally, bye week's finally over. We get to talk some more football other than what's been going on in the Big 12. So, yeah, really excited about this week for the Big 12 and excited to watch this healthy Tech team get back on the playing field.
Yeah, healthy is the key word. I mean, that's what's great about bye weeks, right? Like, bye weeks allow you to get healthy, take a break, sit back and say, look at the canvas of the land. Look, everybody else eat each other. Well, it won't be us this week. So, absolutely, Texas Tech is fairly healthy as we speak now. Also, to talk about the health and safety of the team and everyone in Lubbock, we have the people's champ himself, Jeremy Gillen. What's up, Jeremy?
This is the most healthy Texas Tech has been in some time. When's the last time that we had a Texas Tech squad this ready to go halfway through the season? Usually it feels like at this point we are facing attrition. We are down in the depth chart, can't get a healthy whatever. It's usually the quarterback. But now we're sitting here with kind of the back end of the schedule thinking we aren't really missing anybody big. This is kind of huge. So pretty stoked about what's to come.
I don't want to say I'm not going to say it. I'm not going to say it. A certain person has 6 games in on the season still upright. So that's fantastic as well. Trying to be the first one to do that since 2017, I believe. So that'll be amazing. If you don't know who I'm talking about, I'm not going to say it here on the mic. All right, you will not blame me for what may happen towards the end. All right. So, anyways, with that being said, Texas Tech, we beat the bye. We beat it. We smacked it. It was 66-6. We beat the bye. And so as we move on towards Baylor and the Big 12, I think I didn't necessarily get a chance to talk to you guys about the thoughts about the Big 12 race as we head into the second half of the season. All right, so I know you got a chance to talk to Shion about it, gain his thoughts of where Texas Tech is on the race. But as of right now, Texas Tech is joined by 9th-ranked Iowa State and 13th-ranked BYU as the only undefeated teams in the conference. It's very much like that meme of the three dragons, right? You got 9th-ranked Iowa State looking fierce, 13th-ranked BYU looking fierce, and then unranked Texas Tech looking goofy, right? But we're undefeated in conference. We're 5-1 in the season. We, depending on who you talk to, I personally think we deserve to be either at or near the ranking, way more than, 11 AP votes, whatever it was. But it doesn't matter. Either way, those are the 3 undefeated teams. The path to a Big 12 title game, oddly enough, is there. I mean, let's face it, a 8-1 conference record will get you in the Big 12 title game. That's not there's no doubt in my mind, right? 7-2, maybe with some help, right? But even that alone is still looking at 4-2 down the stretch. Like the path is there. I don't know the last time we were in a position to, 6 games into the season where we're like, oh my God, we can make something happen, was 2013 where we started the season off 7-0. We're not going to talk about that, but that's how long it's been since we've been still in the race this far into the season. Joe, what are your thoughts as far as Texas Tech as we move forward to the second half?
I'm looking forward to it. You have 2 very winnable games to start off this next 4-game stretch because we have a secondary bye week after the 4-game stretch, so we have 4 games, then another bye week, and then the final 2. So I think this is where you make that move. If you go 3-1 in this 4-game stretch, then now you actually positioned yourself great, with Oklahoma State and West Virginia to close out the season. And I think this is just you're putting yourself in the right positions to be recognized. Me and Jeremy talked about it a whole lot in the last episode where, Tech felt, even us, as Tech feeling disrespected to a sense. It's like, is the media ultimately looking at Tech like, oh no, we're not touching that. We've been down this road before, they get hot, we get all on them. And then all of a sudden they just, ultimate collapse happens. So this is just some time so we could get some respect. And I think the winning on the road was the start of all of this. You get that win on the road. You finally get that kind of that monkey off your back with Coach McGuire, winning on the road in a very tough environment and matchup, to say the least, given how Tech had been playing. So, this is just a step. And then you go into the bye week, you get healthy, and now you start off coming off the bye week with 2 very winnable games. I think as a Tech fan, as a Tech player, I think you got to feel really good about the position that you've put yourself in up into this point 6 games in.
Absolutely. Jeremy, you got anything else to add to that?
Nope. Hit it exactly as it should be.
So as we look in the back half of the season here, we do have the teams that we will be playing. We're playing a Baylor team that's 0-3, a TCU team that is 1-2. Right, we will get the opportunity to play. We will have to play a 3-0 Iowa State, right, as well as a 2-1 Colorado and a 2-1 West Virginia. But we will double back and also play an 0-3 Oklahoma State. So over 6 games, 3 teams are towards the bottom of the Big 12, as we currently stated. Then you have 3 teams that are towards the top and have a winning record in conference. The cynic in me says, 3-3 ain't too bad. The cynic in me is like, you go through 3-3. But Jeremy, do you actually have your hopes adjusted? I know you predicted an 8-4 record. So if we go 3-3 from here on out, we will hit that 8-4 that you predicted at the beginning of the season. But have your thoughts towards this team changed to where now you're looking at that and saying, we can do better than 3-3. We can go and have a 9-3 record or a 10-2 record, like Joe said, or an 11-1 record and really ride this train all the way out.
I think that my expectations certainly have changed, and a lot of that comes from the form that we've been playing in, as well as the health of the team. I think that, as well as the way that conference foes have kind of revealed themselves, right? So we play, the 2 private schools back to back, both of which are struggling in their own ways, and they're both having these conversations with each other as fans of like, this coach is kind of not it. Like we need something else. And we're facing 2 teams that are like hands are right next to the panic button. And, if you can look at that like, okay, well, that's going to be a cakewalk and we can scoot past them. Or you can also see it as like they're in desperation mode, and coaches are probably looking for ways to validate their job and try to save their job. Like Dave Aranda is probably going to come into Lubbock and be like, I'm going to win this game to save my job. And those are really difficult. Those end up being more difficult games than you want them to be, right? But between Baylor, TCU, and then Oklahoma State, those are manageable games. I think McGuire has shown us so far this season that, this team can handle those situations. Even going on the road to Stillwater, that's not going to be the challenge that it was. I was thinking it would be at the beginning of the season, right? At that point, Oklahoma State may be just defunct. Like there may be very few people at the stadium, right? Because of how they're playing. There's just no way to tell, but they're not on a good trail. As far as Iowa State, Iowa State's the one that I'm like, Ames in November. I don't care if we're, what would be 7-1 ranked, whatever it is. I'm not touching that one. I can't say we're going to win that. The real test for me comes down to how do you handle a good Colorado team who has shown a lot of offensive power, and how do you handle a West Virginia team that has all the pieces and has shown some sparks? So I think truly I'm a little bit more optimistic than I was at the beginning. I would have said, hey, 3-3 is great here, like, because that gets us to 8-4. And I think that's an awesome result for the season. But I think that you can actually I think Joe's 10-2 is not too far off. You just got to make sure you play solid football.
If we were to end the season 8-4, would you be disappointed?
Me?
Yeah.
Nope.
From like where we are now, it means we ride it out 3-3 rest of the year. You would not be disappointed?
Of course, it depends how that 8-4 comes, because if it's like, oh, you lose to Baylor and TCU back to back, I'm disappointed, right? That would suck. Like that would be like, we have to have a conversation.
Let me tell you something, brother. We lose to TCU and Baylor back to back. We ain't going 8-4.
We're about to be on the slide of the century, a slide of the decade since 13.
Yeah.
But if you struggle against Iowa State, lose that one. If it's a close loss to Colorado, and if you lose to like Oklahoma State on the road, even if they're bad, it's on the road. You know, those are that 3-3. You know, that 8-4 is a little bit more appealing than like losses to all the schools that are losing right now, right?
Joe, tell him to get his guns up and be ready for this 10-2, 11-1 explosion.
Hey, man, we've been taking it a game at a time, and it's progression, and that's all that we've been doing. And I don't have my cup, so I'm not going to say it, but we have a cup that has this little saying on it that we stand by, and that is stacking success.
Stacking success.
You know, it's one of those deals, you know, especially on the health end, with all of the back end help we're getting with the secondary. Lux is back. McGuire said something really interesting the other day in his presser about, you know, Chapman Lewis he's going to play. And whenever he has it as questionable in there, it's probably he's about on the 80% good side, which is more like a probable to me, which is kind of funny that he said it. No, he's questionable, but 80% chance he's going to play in this game. So I just think it's one of those things, you know, we've put ourselves in a position to where it's just a 1-by-1 game. So it's this week is Baylor, next week is TCU, then we can worry about Iowa State in 3 weeks. That's not necessarily has to be on our radar right now. Baylor's reeling. Yes, they're going to probably come in all hands deck with Coach Aranda. He's going to want to throw the kitchen sink at us, you know, because he's coaching. I think he's at DEFCON 2 right now, and then Sonny Dykes is probably at DEFCON 3. Just like Jeremy alluded to, that hand is getting closer and closer to that panic button on what's going to happen with these football programs moving forward. So for me personally, I think you've just already put yourself in a position. 10-2 is really possible. Oklahoma State, Bowman may not even play that game. Let's call it for what it is, how he's been playing right now. Ollie Gordon.
Garrett Rangel, I think, is starting this week. Yeah.
Right. Ollie Gordon is a shell of himself from compared to last year. He's not. And then Presley, right? That's the wide receiver's name there. What's his last name?
Brennan Presley.
Yeah. I mean, he hasn't really done anything because Bowman hasn't done anything. So, I mean, it's easy for us to look down the road and down the pipeline. We do get West Virginia here, which I think helps us a whole lot. Garrett Green could cause problems, and they're kind of that iffy mark. Colorado is Colorado. You know, they did put 400-plus yards on a Kansas State team, which is known for their defenses. I mean, but yeah, I think the great thing about this year, and I'll keep on going back to it, is Coach McGuire and this team going 1-0 every week. 1-0 every week. They're not looking too far ahead. They're not letting the media people get in their head for not showing any kind of respect for what they've done up until this point, given that it hasn't been great. So I think 10-2 is very doable. I'm not going to be disappointed if we don't get there, but I do think that it is in our favor.
Yeah. So y'all talking about the coaching hot seat. I decided to go to coacheshotseat.com. And if you go to coacheshotseat.com, if you're listening to this, big-faced front page, Week 8 top 20 college football coaches hot seat, Dave Aranda. Dave Aranda right there in his Baylor green. Number 1 on the hot seat. I saw some Baylor fans saying how much that they can't fire Dave Aranda because it means that they may lose their recruiting class. They might lose the recruiting class. And you know what? They're right. And I hope they have this opinion forever. I hope forever they feel like they cannot fire Dave Aranda because, oh my God, what about the recruiting class? Right? It'll be beautiful. Listen, I am somebody who thought Dave Aranda would be a good hire for Texas Tech, former Texas Tech coach, or former Texas Tech grad. I'm somebody who thought Sonny Dykes would be a good hire. obviously they shouldn't listen to me. Okay, I'm 0 for 2 on both of those. Neil Brown in West Virginia, liked him, thought he'd be a good fit. He's been okay in West Virginia. I don't think he's terrible. He hasn't been good, right? Joey, everybody was on him. Everybody's on the bandwagon. I was last to get on the bandwagon. Well, this is why I don't get paid the big bucks. Okay, obviously when it comes to coaching, I don't know how to pick them. But when it comes to picking this team, I know how to pick them. And when it comes to picking clothes, I know how to pick it. That's right. Our friends over at Charlie Hustle, they are a vintage retailer based out of Kansas City, home of the undefeated Super Bowl champion Kansas City Chiefs, where Pat Mahomes is. Pat Mahomes giving that nice little gladiator wear. And if you want that vintage wear with the Masked Rider, with the gladiator, actually with the I got the double T-shirt I got from Charlie Hustle has the double T gladiator, the old school one on it. So make sure to go cop that with our promo code 101215. That is TEN1215, 15% off of all non-sale items. That is promo code 101215. CharlieHustle.com. Charlie Hustle, vintage made fresh. So, guys, let's start talking about this game this Saturday, 4 p.m. local in Lubbock on ESPN2, nationally televised. All our games are. I don't know why I said it like that. But for maybe Baylor, I don't know if ESPN was like, do we really want to? They're 2-4. Let's go make the trip out. Actually, if they not fired RG3, I thought that'd been a great game for him to go to, as he's doing his due diligence to carry the water for the Baylor Bears and put out tweets supporting Dave Aranda, and I hope he continues it. It'll be great. Jeremy, give us your initial thoughts when it comes to this game, Baylor at Texas Tech.
I kind of mentioned it that this very much feels like a situation where Baylor they're at the end of the rope. They are looking in full desperation. They're looking for some kind of momentum, some kind of success, right? Because they have just been suffering. And in the preseason or in the non-con, right, they had Tarleton State, Air Force, and that was their 2 wins. They had a loss to Utah, but at the time Utah was ranked 11th, and so they thought, hey, 23-12 to Utah, that's pretty good. And then they beat Air Force 31-3. And it was like, we are kind of riding high. And I remember a lot of Baylor fans, a lot of Baylor burners were like, hey, you watch out for these Bears. Texas Tech sucks. Well, then they have that overtime game against Colorado, right? They lose. They have a 34-28 loss against BYU, but they lose. And then 43-21 against Iowa State, they lose. It's not like they've been keeping games. You can look at the Colorado and BYU game and think they've been keeping it close. But the reality is that the margin of loss is getting larger and larger and larger. So by mathematics, we should beat Baylor by whatever 43 minus 21 is, 22. So this Baylor team is just they're ready for a win. They're ready for something. Now, are they cohesive enough to make that happen? I'm not sure. And that's the thing about this Baylor team is that they just haven't proven that they have got anything going. It's been a very Robinson hasn't been too awful a quarterback, but outside of that, like it can be like, hey, looking forward, it could be pretty good, but as Baylor right now is pretty bad.
Joe, what are your thoughts?
Just initial thoughts. I mean, they have played, 2 conference teams. Well, actually, the Utah counted as a non-con, if I'm correct, just because that was previously scheduled itself. So that doesn't count as a conference loss. But I mean, he lost to Utah. It is what it is. But the games against Colorado and also Iowa State, they did keep things interesting in the first half. Something that they did come out and do. They were down a couple at Colorado. They were down a couple in Ames to Iowa State. So, I mean, it's kind of like a mixed bag of what you're going to see. Sawyer Robertson, I mean, necessarily isn't great. If you're looking at his numbers, 1,000 passing yards and I think like 140 rushing yards on the season. I mean, 9 touchdowns to 3 interceptions, been sacked 5 times. I mean, completions, I think right around 60%. I mean, numbers that aren't necessarily jumping off the page there. But I think that this team has enough on their side of the field, and they also did get healthy during this bye week that, they could potentially make a push. Now, does it need to start this Saturday? I really hope it doesn't start this Saturday, but I think overall for what Baylor has and what they've been doing over the course of the last couple of games, it hasn't been consistent enough. It's just like us in the sense that, we don't know what we're going to get, on this day, who's going to show up, our offense, our defense, neither, and how are we going to get these wins, or how are we going to get points on the board or stops whenever we need them. So it's nothing really compelling that just stands out for this Baylor team, but it's just, it's one of those games where it feels like it could potentially be a trap game for Tech if they don't come out, with the right mindset out of this bye week.
And remember that Baylor started the season, DeQuan Finn was supposed to be QB1. That was like their guy. And that fell apart quicker than, if it's gone, gone are the days of DeQuan Finn. Now it's a Soy Robertson. And just being a young, what are they doing, right? There's a lot of turnover for Baylor trying to figure out what's going to work.
They made that move so quickly. They saw DeQuan Finn against Utah. We're like, oh, we made a mistake. And the thing about it is that, how many mistakes is Dave Aranda going to make? It actually reminds me a lot of when we had Cliff Kingsbury. And every year we were like, well, he's learning. He's learning. And eventually you're like, dude, have you learned yet? When are we going to get to learn? I will say this. This is my only pushback with Baylor. I'm of the opinion that Baylor is not a good team. The only pushback I give to myself and I give to everybody else who agrees that they're not a good team is that their schedule has been tough. They have played already the two best teams in the conference by both ranking and the fact they're both undefeated in BYU and Iowa State. Now, mind you, the BYU score looks close, 34-28. It was not. BYU had full control of that game for the most part overall. But they played the two toughest teams in the conference already. They played a game in Colorado which they should have won. They kind of screwed themselves up on that one. And when they played Utah, despite the abysmal performance by DeQuan Finn, that was a game that Cam Rising played in. That was the last game that Cam Rising played, right? I think everybody's agreed that Utah with Cam Rising in the game is a completely different player. So it does give me a little pause to say, okay, the four teams they played a Colorado team that's 2-1 in conference, and they should have beaten. And they played the two best teams in conference, arguably outside of Texas Tech. And then they played a Utah team that, with their star quarterback, was a favorite for the conference title. So is it that they're terrible, or they've just had the worst time to play those four teams you could possibly have, right? So that's the only thing that gives me pause. And again, we had the bye week last week, but they also did. So both teams are coming into a bye week. Both teams, if anything, if any team is hungry, it should be Baylor. It should be Baylor that if Aranda is any type of coach during that bye week saying, hey guys, we went through the gauntlet, look ahead. Ahead for Baylor is much easier. They have one of the easiest conferences in all of power, or one of the easiest schedules in all of power conference. After Tech, you have Oklahoma State, we already talked about, was pretty bad. You have TCU, we already talked about, was pretty bad. You have Houston, who's awful. You have Kansas, who's awful, right? Of the 6 remaining games, Tech and West Virginia are the only two teams that have winning records for Baylor. So if I'm Baylor, I'm like, a bowl is still possible. And it starts in Lubbock this weekend. So that is my only pause when it comes to Baylor, is that, are they really bad, or have they just already played their gauntlet? Joe, thoughts?
That's a fair point. They've gone through a ringer and not having a stable quarterback situation. And we all know what, you don't have a good solid quarterback room in the Big 12. It's very tough to win. And if Flynn didn't get the job done, now you throw Robertson in there, your secondary option, and then the play calling and other things that are going on with this football program. You're not setting yourself up to succeed in this conference, but the chips were kind of stacked against you at the start. So there's a little pause there because they've been through it at the start, but I don't think they've shown anything that's proven that it's going. Yeah, the schedule shows that it's going to get easier, but I mean, as a team wise, they haven't shown anything that makes me believe that they're going to get right back on that horse and take off. So, but still, it all kind of falls back to Aranda, to your point. If he's any kind of coach, he knows how warm his seat is. He knows how hot his seat is, so this is one of those games that, like I said, it's going to be a telling sign on his coaching ability. And if this Baylor team is ready to come into Lubbock and, put up a fight, or if they're just going to lay flat.
So, Jeremy, you talked earlier about this Baylor Bears team, them having Daquan Finn, now with Sawyer Robertson at quarterback. What are you have been the quarterback whisperer this year. What are your thoughts on Sawyer Robertson and how good a quarterback he is as he starts his game for the Bears?
Sawyer Robertson, I think when you look at his gameplay, and a lot of the issue comes down to, I think, trying to do too much. I think Sawyer Robertson, the reason that his completions are so poor is partly on the receiver. There are times where Baylor's receivers do not help him out at all. But I think for the majority of the part, like, you can go back and look, especially in the BYU game, there's a number of opportunities where he has an open guy, but he's just not looking that way. He's trying to force it down somewhere else where he feels like this is where the primary, like, this is where it should go. And that kind of stuff is not taught. That kind of stuff is, you get comfortable and you want to remain comfortable. So instead of trying to extend a play and make things happen, I'm going to try to make this. I'm just going to try to force the issue here and assume my receiver is going to do his job really well. Sometimes if you have good receivers, i.e. like Johnny Manziel and Mike Evans, hey, I don't care if he's quadruple covered, like, throw it down there, it'd be fine. But for the majority of wide receivers in the Division One football, it's just not the case. Like, you got to give them some space. You got to respect their route running. I mean, and if they're covered, don't throw it to them. Like, that's just how it is. So I think Robinson, he just tries to force a lot of things. And this is where, like with what Joe is saying, you can say they've played the hardest teams thus far. And Colorado's defense isn't bad, but it still gives up points. BYU's is a lot better. And Iowa State's is obviously the best of the bunch. But at the same time, they only put up 12 points against Utah, a team that has proven itself incapable of stopping other teams. And so it's kind of hard to tell what kind of Baylor is going to show up. Like, if Baylor wants a chance, Roberts is going to have to be, like, in his bag. He's going to have the most tremendous bye week, and he's going to have to believe that he can stay in the pocket and make it happen, and, like, go through his reads, because it's just something that he hasn't proven to been able to do so far in the season. So if he's in his own head still, then it's going to be a long game for Baylor, just because they're not going to be able to get a lot of stuff going through the air. And I don't think that Baylor really has kind of a rushing prowess with Washington or Pendergrass to say, hey, we can make it happen. You'll actually notice that they run Robinson quite a bit, because I think that the issue is, like, he's like one of the best athletes we have. Let's force the issue. That wears a guy with his talent level down pretty quickly. And I think that's what's lost them a lot of games, is just you use and abuse him. And by the third quarter, it's like he's gassed. He's just gassed.
Well, one thing with Sawyer Robertson is that he is making his return to the 806, Lubbock Coronado alum. So, and my thought about players, revenge is on their mind, coming back home. We saw with Abilene Christian. We did not see with UNT at all. But, Sawyer Robertson coming back to Lubbock definitely is going to – and actually starting a game coming back to Lubbock. So that's definitely going to be some blood there. Joe, what are your thoughts on this Baylor offense, including some of the I know Jeremy mentioned some of the running backs, but also their skill players, and who do we need to look out for?
Josh Cameron would be the wide receiver. I think he's leading the team with almost closer to 300 receiving yards on 18 receptions. So, averaging about 15 yards a reception. Hawkins, Presley, and then tight end and Michael Trigg. All of these guys, are contributors. All of these guys have over 15 receptions on the season. All of them have multiple touchdown catches, with Cameron leading the way with 4 touchdown catches or grabs themselves. Those guys are going to be, counted on for if Sawyer Robertson wants to be successful in his comeback to Lubbock. They don't necessarily run the ball a whole lot. They have a couple guys over 30 carries on the season, and Richard Reese, Dawson Pendergrass, Bryson Washington, all around that 140 plus yards. And then, like Jeremy alluded to, and Sawyer Robertson with another 27 carries of his own as well. It's just, there's just multiple guys that could come at you, but multiple guys that, you could kind of pin your ears back to a degree, because they're not really running the ball. So, Coach DeRuiter is going to have a chance to fully scheme. He's had 2 weeks to prepare for this game. We are getting healthier, as we've all alluded to this bye week. So for us on this, or for Baylor's offense, it's going to be a tough ask for them to come into Lubbock and try to steal a win here, given, just the mediocrity of this offense. And then also just another thing that could potentially be a thing to keep an eye on is the weather here in Lubbock. The temperature, I believe, or at least for what I'm seeing right now, there's a 40% chance of rain, and the high is only of 67. So if now you're already having to shut down your passing game because Mother Nature is telling you can't throw the ball because you're really not good at it, now that kind of falls into what Texas Tech does, on the defensive side in the run stop.
Let me tell you, if this becomes a running game, sorry, Baylor. I will say one thing I was gonna also ask is this. So Baylor has 5 running backs, or 5 players, running backs and quarterback included, that have over 100 yards, but none over 200. They also have 6 receivers with over 100 yards receiving, but none over 300. So usually that means one of 2 things. Usually it means that Baylor either loves to spread the ball around and has plenty of weapons that can, utilize in many different ways, or they all stink. Joe, which way are you leaning between the 2?
I haven't seen enough of Baylor's football season to say that they all stink. I bet all of them have something that they could contribute to, but they just haven't done it on a consistent basis.
What a political answer. Listen, the election is not till next month. All right.
I don't want to sit here and say they're all trash.
These guys stink.
Presley
in our chairs.
Presley could be a problem. He's a bigger wide receiver at 6'4". Our defensive backs are, around 5'11", 6 feet tall. That could present a problem. I'm not saying that they're total garbage, but just the consistency out of that whole group, that whole offensive group. It's just nothing to worry about.
Yeah. Jeremy, as we kind of flip over to the defensive side of the ball, looking at some of the people that Baylor has in tow and things that they can do, is this a defensive squad that we should look at and say, oh, watch out now? For their schedule, if we look at their games outside of last week's Iowa State game where they let Iowa State drop 43, the defense, points-wise, has actually done a decent job. Even in their losses, only gave up 23 points to Utah. Most of that was damage done in the first half. Colorado game actually went into overtime, right, where they actually were able to hold Colorado less than what Shador and Sanders and company would like. BYU, same thing. So outside of, I get it. Iowa State, they got ran through. But outside of that, this team has been able to keep things more at bay. Even the BYU game, second half, they kept that offense kind of off the scoreboard. So what are your thoughts about this defense?
I think that Matt Pallage is a great defensive coordinator. I think that that's somebody who gets kind of underrated when you're talking about Baylor, just in terms of how bad their offense and overall production is. You forget about guys like Matt Pallage, who has a lot of experience, organizing defensive units. And what you'll notice about Baylor is that outside, Keaton Thomas and then Matt Jones being the linebacking crew, their strength really is in their linebackers right now. It's pretty even across the board because I think Baylor does a really good job of scheming kind of basic defenses and allowing their guys to go out and perform. Does not mean that they are impenetrable, right? I think there's a barrier of talent that keeps them from being great, right? They're all kind of just at this middling level of like no superstars, but all trying to kind of make it happen. And I think that Matt Powers is just doing a really good job with what he's got there. It's part of the reason that they, outside of the Iowa State game, like you said, haven't given up in terms of like Big 12 expectations, haven't really given up too terribly much in the way of points. And so, as far as like what's going to be more of the challenge on Saturday, for me, it does come down to how are we going to wear down this Baylor defense? And honestly, a part of that may be our defense just playing better and getting their offense off the field a lot because their defense can be good. But if we have them on the field most of the game, then they're going to get pretty tired of being good. And, that kind of stuff wears them down. Then you can go for deep balls. You can have big breakaway runs. You get more of the chunk plays. But in the beginning, this is what's going to be kind of, I don't think Texas Tech's going to come out very fast. And it's mostly going to be because Matt Powledge scheming against Morton and Taj Brooks.
Yeah, I made a joke before about this being if it was a run game, it's bad for Baylor. Baylor is the fourth worst rush offense in the conference. They are also the fourth worst rush defense in the conference. Joe, who are some players we got to look out for?
Also making his comeback to Lubbock, Texas, Mr. Steve Linton coming back to Lubbock to see Texas Tech, his former team. The Syracuse transfer from a couple years ago, kind of garnished all of this kind of hype around him, coming into that first season year at Texas Tech as, one of those edge rushers that could get to the quarterback and ultimately, wreak havoc in the backfield. That never panned out here. Not saying that it just never panned out here. The same thing's kind of shown the same at Baylor. I mean, he has 2 sacks on the season, but his name has been called in that Colorado game mostly, but Colorado's offensive line is trash, so I don't really take a whole lot to that. He was, abusing a true freshman, and even if he was a 5-star or not, I mean, he's just a power rush edge guy who's a speed guy getting to Shedeur Sanders that entire game. Steve Linton, Matt Jones, obviously those 2 guys. The defense is their secondary. I don't know all of their guys' names. Matter of fact, I don't know any of their guys' names, but I do know that as a unit themselves, they play fairly well. I don't know what the exact stat is on how many passing yards that they're allowing a game, but I mean, it is a pretty stacked unit in the back end. But Matt Jones, Steve Linton would probably be the 2 that come off the page first because they're going to be tasked with stopping Taj.
So I will say this about Steve Linton, and this is no disrespect at all. He looks the same. Last year we were frustrated by his lack of production. This year I look at him like other than the fact that he looks like he's a 45-year-old mechanic, he looks the same. Like as far as his play itself. And I know that I know he wouldn't have feared me when he played at Tech last year. Doesn't really fear me now. And this is no disrespect, no beef. I'm just calling a spade a spade. I will say, Jeremy, I do think I know who your favorite player on this defense is. And I think he goes by the name of Garmin Randolph because he's a giant. Dude is 6'8", 260.
I do like the measurables.
Yeah. Oh, my goodness. This dude is massive. Massive. And I do think he's going to be a bit of an issue, right? He's the one that I think sticks out to me a little bit more on that coming off the edge, just his length, his size. He's an athletic guy. And he even has that one batted interception that he had earlier in this year. So he can make things happen. I will say, though, where I look at a guy like that that's a freakish athlete compared to a guy we had a couple years ago that was a top pick, Tyree Wilson, who's a freakish athlete. Tyree Wilson, his athleticism combined with his production was incredible. Garmin Randolph, to me, is very inconsistent, but will likely be a draft pick because he's a mammoth of a man. Goodness gracious, this dude is huge. And so you did talk also, Joe, about the fact that their lack of secondary. Let me tell you, brother, you are not alone. I don't know. who does play on the secondary. I was looking at this earlier yesterday when I was thinking about this game, and I was like, okay, I mean they have Corey Gordon. Corey Gordon has 2 picks on the game or on the year. I mean, he's a decent safety for them. Okay.
Yeah.
Is that it? Like, I don't, and
That's 177 a game that they're allowing, though. They're
yeah,
passing. It's just like, well, I mean, they're doing something, kind of right back there.
So takeaway beef, their safeties are both pretty good, right? Gordon's good. Devin Body's one of the team leaders in tackles. Kind of plays a little bit closer to the line, gets really aggressive there in the run game as well. Their safeties, I think, are allowing them to keep everything in front and limiting some of these plays. But a lot of Baylor in the past decade have had these swarming defenses that go all over the place, that really pressure you, but then also their secondary is like there in a flash, and we're just not seeing that in Dave Aranda's rendition. So though their safety play I still think is pretty decent. To your point, Joe, I do think you get him on the outsides quite a bit, which is where Morton likes to go anyway. So that's fine. And I think we definitely have some advantages here over when looking at this team. So, guys, it is time for our prize picks predictions. That's right. Prize picks. Download the app, pull it up, put in your name, new user, and your first $100. We will, not we, Prize Picks.
We will
match that with our promo code. Jerry might match that, big money man over there. But Prize Picks will do that 100% match up to $100 using our promo code TAKES12. That is TAKES12 to get that 100% match up to $100 using Prize Picks today. So, Mr. Gillen, Jeremy, give me your keys. Texas Tech keys for Texas Tech victory.
It sounds goofy because we've been saying it all along, but when Taj Brooks plays well, this team is different. And that's something that Shehan talked about on the last episode, that the first 2 games, okay, weird, but then Taj Brooks got involved with the offense, and this team has just been night and day. And I'm very much in the mindset that, like, after Shehan said it, that we have not seen Tech's best football yet, because we're still kind of filling out some okay, can we kind of incorporate this, or can we incorporate, like, how can we make this happen? And for me, I think one of the biggest things for Saturday is going to be, if Baylor's 4th worst in rush defense, well, damn it, we better just make them the third worst, or the whatever, make them worse, right? And I think that starts up front. And running the ball, hey, rain or shine, if you're running the ball, you should be able to run the ball. Excuse me, rain or shine, should be able to run the ball. For me, establish the run and establish it early, and wear that defense out so that you can open up more passing lanes later in the game.
That was a very long-winded key. Joe, give me your Texas Tech keys for Texas Tech victory.
Yeah, just the trenches on both sides of the ball. We steadily have increased the workload on the trench sides on offense and defense. This offensive line, I believe this will be their 5th game playing together as a unit, as this exact unit. So no changes there. So that's obviously a good thing. We're finally getting over those losses of Scurry and the moving around different positions on the offensive line. So we kind of have some cohesiveness there. They've had an extra week of practice to go, but I'm just going to say two things major: continuing the owning the trenches on both sides of the ball, and then also just being effective in the red zone like we've been all season, getting down into the red zone and converting into touchdowns. I think we do that, then we'll put ourselves in a good spot to win this football game.
Keep the good times rolling. That Texas Tech is the fan base. I don't know the last time that we felt this good into the season, right? And this is not a season that I think after the Washington State game we would have thought we'd be feeling very good about. 2 games into the season, we thought the sky was falling. We thought, people were starting to even question Joey McGuire as a coach, whether he was going to be the answer at Texas Tech. And what a difference 5 weeks makes. Now we're sitting 5-1, undefeated in conference, with a roadmap to Arlington. It is crazy, but we just got to keep the good times rolling. Don't slip up here. I mentioned it before that Baylor is viewed as a bad team, but they do have some good pieces. We talked about it. Sway Robertson, he hasn't been terrible. He is a decent piece, right? Their defense has done a decent job of limiting some of these big action plays, these big plays, limiting some of these points. And this is a team that, though they're 2-4, Baylor fans are making this joke they're the best 2-4 team in the country. It might be right. Like they've had an abysmal schedule up to this point, so don't take them for granted. But you got to keep the good times rolling here. And so I do have some interesting little trends here between these two teams. So Texas Tech, 8-2 in our last 10. Last 10 overall games. We are 8-2, gentlemen. You want to know what Baylor is? They're 2-8. 2-8 in their last 10. Not great, Bob.
Not great.
Texas Tech, we have hit the first quarter game total over in our last 6 games at home. The over-under right now, I believe, is 13 for the first quarter game total. So we have hit that first quarter total over in the last 6 home games. Baylor has hit the under in 7 of their last 10 games for first quarter game total. I don't know what that. So like I said, that's total. I'm talking about for both teams. So really what that tells me is that Baylor ain't scoring while Tech is, right? So that helps there. Texas Tech home games we have won and hit the money line in our last 6 home games. We've done a really good job there. We've also hit the first half money line, which means we have been in the lead at halftime in 4 of our last 6 home games. We've also covered the spread in 4 of our last 7 home games. We doing pretty well here at Texas Tech. So, Joe, what is your prediction? Does Texas Tech tie up the Texas Tech-Baylor rivalry overall? Do we get this done?
We do. We get this dub. Wouldn't say we're not even panic where I stand at, possibilities of them actually coming in here and winning this football game. I just think this is just a game that we is next on the list, 1-0. And I think this is where we start off the next 4 games off with a victory. Taj Brooks going to go over another 100 yards a game. He's going to do Baylor dirty 2 consecutive years in a row on his exit out of college football. And I don't think Baylor has enough consistency to show me that, that this is going to be more of a fight. Also, interesting nugget, their kicker is terrible. Last time, he just sucks. I mean, it is what it is, just like the Cincinnati kicker. It's just one of those deals. If this actually happened to come down to a kick, I don't like their chances anymore in this game, but I just don't think it's going to be close enough in that regard. 35-17, Texas Tech.
35-17. That is a confident answer right there. Jeremy, what do you got?
You're muted.
It was very insightful. I read lips. It was like I was like, "Man, God!"
I was saying some pretty obscene stuff. I'm so glad I had that muted. Otherwise, I wouldn't make it till tomorrow. I like what Joe's been saying about how inconsistent Baylor is. Baylor has had a hard time creating and sustaining momentum this year, and just getting those stats that you've just illuminated us to, Albert. I think that Texas Tech kind of stays with Baylor's loss margin of just it's not getting great start for Baylor, especially on the road, especially if it's poor weather. But I think Texas Tech comes out with a victory, especially being fully healthy, right? I think everybody's starting to smell that blood in the water of we're getting a little, it's bowl eligibility if we win this game. When was the last time we were bowl eligible in October? Good Lord.
2013.
It was some time, right? So it's like I think that they can smell that. I think that that's exciting for the guys. I do believe this 1-0 mentality is for real this year. They're definitely showing it. Give me Texas Tech Red Raiders 38-20 over Baylor Bears.
So I'm gonna tell you why you're both wrong, but not in the way you're thinking. So I'm gonna give Baylor a little bit more respect, and this is why. Well, it's less. I'm gonna give Baylor a little more respect, and I think I've mentioned why actually throughout this episode. But a big reason why I'm gonna give Baylor a little bit more respect is also because, guys, Texas Tech doesn't win games that easily. We don't win games that easily. We want us to stress, right? If we're not saying fire Joey by the third quarter, what's going on? All right, that is that the nature of this whole season has been are we good? Question mark. Because the only time we play, we're like, well, we did barely beat Arizona State and didn't feel good, but we did beat them. And, well, we did let Arizona get all the way back into the game before finally getting that strip fumble at the end there. We did beat them. And, yeah, I mean, we did find a way to beat Abilene Christian, but, man, was it ugly. But we did beat them. That's how all of these games have gone, and it ain't going to stop now. So I do agree we're going to win the game. I got 35-31. We're going to make sure this game is close. It's going to be close, guys. This is how this works. The game's going to be close. I think Sawyer Robertson is going to have a good game. I think he's going to be back in Lubbock. I'm sure he's bought a bunch. I'm sure all his boys are back. Sawyer. They're going to be wearing Texas Tech shirts underneath, but they're going to have like custom-made Sawyer Robertson jerseys, right? 'Cause that's their guy. I think he's going to have a good 300-yard game, right? And we're going to be saying, man, that's Sawyer. Secondary's not doing, we're going to be saying, well, what the hell are we doing? What was going on here? And then at the end, it's going to be like, Taj, thanks, man. 35-31. That's, I just think that's how every game is. You talked about the one.
That's how you get to 6-1 and you're unranked. So you're
yes,
right.
yes, yes, absolutely.
That's a perfect recipe for that. That is exactly accurate.
Y'all talked about, like you just mentioned, of us going 1-0 every week. I think one of the biggest differences I would argue between the Joey McGuire iteration and previous years is through the Matt Walsh tenure, through the Cliff Kingsbury tenure, and a little bit through the Tommy Tuberville tenure, we would lose close games. If the game was close, it was like, okay, we're going to lose this. We are going to make this game close, but we are not going to do what is necessary at the end of the game to win. Even as something as simple as on a 4th and 3, shockingly letting a TCU receiver keep his pinky toe inbound at the back of the end zone. Or playing Baker Mayfield's Oklahoma and needing just literally one stop in the second half to win the game and it not coming, right? Like we have a decade full of teams that just would not win when the game mattered. This team, Joey McGuire in the 3 years, whether we can be as frustrated as we want, when the game is on the line, when you're playing Oklahoma in a game that you didn't seem like you were going to win early on, we pulled through at the end. Playing Iowa State on the road in terrible weather, in the end, we were able to win that game, right? Like those situations, we have just, with Joey McGuire, found ways to win. Flip side of that, we ain't whooping anybody. Ain't no blowouts. Yes. But we're finding ways to win. So I think it'll be another one where we want to die halfway through, and then we're like, oh, that meme that's been going around where it's like, I'm so excited to watch football, and then it's a team where it's like, I'm going to kill myself, and then at the end it's like, oh, hey, we won. And everybody's using this. That is the epitome of Texas Tech football under Joey McGuire, which I'll take that over the alternative, because at the end of the day, there's at least that, oh, okay, we won. Everybody's adopting that meme, but I'm like, no, you haven't lived this like we have as Joey Mac fans. But yeah, I think all three across the board, we're all picking Tech. Joe, you and I, just like the Red Raiders, are both 5-1 on our predictions this year. You getting the incorrect prediction with us losing to Washington State, me being wrong with us beating Arizona, Jeremy being wrong on both instances at 4-2 there. So before we get out of here, the only other thing that I kind of want to talk to, I know we talked a little bit about the Big 12 kind of being disrespected a little bit. BYU and Iowa State a little bit further back. They should be. Texas Tech not ranked. Another, that's a little bit egregious. Another piece I talked about pre-pod was that the topic of T-shirt fans. All right, big conversation around Twitter today. The topic of T-shirt fans, and let me tell you something. I think most Tech fans feel a type of way about T-shirt fans. I do think that they do. However, that being said, I think most of our disappointment and vitriol towards T-shirt fans are really only guided towards Texas. Like, this is where we usually get it from, right? Because the thing about it is that Tech has T-shirt fans. If you've driven west of Fort Worth, it's, out to Abilene, to San Antonio, to Odessa, El Paso. There are plenty of T-shirt Tech fans. Plenty, right? And we love them, right? Pack out Lubbock. Lubbock. Pack out Lubbock. Pack out the Jones. We love you. Your gang. We're cool, right? We also don't really talk about T-shirt A&M fans. I'm from Houston. They're everywhere in Houston. We really only care about T-shirt Texas fans because you can't get rid of them in the state. Like, if we're being honest, all the places I just mentioned in Houston, in El Paso, in Lubbock, in Odessa, there's also Texas fans that are T-shirt fans that tell us how much we suck. So is it that we all hate T-shirt fans, or is it that we all hate Texas? Joe?
I think we all hate Texas. I mean, I think that's really all it is. The video that came out circulating today was about Texas. Yeah. Like, oh, did you go to Texas? No. I think it's everybody just hates Texas. I mean, they're not even in the Big 12 anymore. And yet at every home football game, any camera that's going into the crowd, it's all you see. It's just like the hate is there. It's just it's everywhere. Just the horns down everywhere. It's everybody hates Texas. Always and forever.
I think it comes from
always and forever, Jeremy.
It is Texas people. It is Texas people that have made T-shirt fandom so annoying, at least in our context, right? Because those are the people that get the loudest about tradition, about academics, about, it's all this stolen valor that, like, they don't really have any claim to. And they're like, that's why Texas is better. And it's like, oh, great. Did you go? No, I went to, UTSA or whatever. It's like, oh, you jackass. But they're everywhere. They're everywhere, and they're very loud. I think that's the T-shirt fans are often the loudest when it comes to school pride. And I don't get that. Like, I actually have no problem with T-shirt fans. I don't care. They're everywhere, whatever. I think it's whenever they like puff up this like sense of pride that they picked a winning team. Like, okay, well, I could just as easily go buy a Texas shirt tomorrow and be like, yeah, we're number one. I can go do that any day of the week. But to go to a university and then suffer through college and then get that degree and then owe them a lot of money, then you can talk some shit, right? Because you did your time. Yeah, you did, especially if you were a Texas fan through the rougher years. Then it's like, okay, yeah, like this probably feels really good for people who went to the University of Texas. But for most T-shirt fans, it's not like that. You can jump off the boat at any time. We cannot jump off the Texas Tech boat.
Yeah, facts.
It will forever and always hurt when they lose. Because it's like,
if I could choose, so I probably would have a long time ago. I'm not gonna lie to you. All right.
That's right. That's right.
So I do, to your point, I think being a T-shirt fan, a lot of the times you're just representing either where you're from or where your ties lay, right? A lot of the times it's my dad went to Texas Tech, went to Baylor, went to Texas, or you're representing where you're from. Like, that's where a lot of T-shirt Texas fans are from. Like, I'll be honest with myself. I live in Houston. There are Tech fans, unless you are related to somebody from Tech. I only knew one guy in my high school that was a Texas Tech fan, and his parents both went to Tech, right? I was a Texas fan myself until it was time to go to college, and I was like, I just didn't like the university. I could have went to Texas. I chose not to. I chose to go to Texas Tech instead. And of course, my fandom went with me. But a lot of the times, it's just you're just wanting to represent where you're from. You're from Louisiana, you're an LSU fan. You're from Alabama, you choose whether you're an Alabama or Auburn fan. Most people in Alabama choose Alabama, right? From Georgia, you choose Georgia. Somebody I work with, they grew up in Georgia, grew up a Georgia fan, but they went to Auburn. Now they're an Auburn fan. Like that is. I think there's nothing wrong with being a teacher fan because usually it's represent. So like I talked about everywhere for Texas Tech. Texas Tech represents West Texas. So if you want to rep West Texas, you rep Texas Tech, right? If you want to rep, kind of the Southeast Texas or even the more blue collar part of the state, you're going to rep A&M. That's nothing wrong. I do agree there's nothing wrong with that. I don't have a problem with that. I don't even have a problem talking about it on a sports fandom sense. The thing that really pisses me off, Jeremy, you alluded to it. Don't come up in here talking about academics. Do not do it. Do not come up here talking about some, couldn't get into Texas. First of all, yes, I could. Second of all, you couldn't get into Texas. Okay. So don't, or A&M or Tech or any of that, right? Like that's my thing is do not have some, or talking about, don't talk about Lubbock. You went to school in Lubbock. You went to school in, at San Jacinto Community College. Don't come up here talking about Lubbock as a college town, right? You went to school out in Brownsville or McAllen, wherever UT Pan Am is, right? Like don't get to come up in here and talk to me about college town, academics, school costs, none of that nonsense if you didn't actually go to the school. That's my whole thing. Other than that, putting on a t-shirt, going to the games, repping this, repping the fandom of the sport, all power to you. I ain't got no problem. Because like I said, you're usually representing the area. But we all have t-shirt fans. Tech, if you grew up in Fort Worth, you're likely going to be a TCU fan. I know a lot of people that didn't go to TCU that were TCU fans because they wanted to rep Fort Worth. Baylor does not have t-shirt fans. I've never met a single person that didn't have a direct tie to Baylor, like a sibling went there, significant other went there. Even the people of Waco choose A&M or Texas. They don't have fans. Houston has fans when they're good. When Houston's good, the city will be like, yeah, go Cougs. When they're like 8-4, they're like, oh, we got a team. Go Texans. Is that what you're talking about?
Right.
Anyways, but ain't nothing wrong with t-shirt fans in my estimation, except for that point. Jeremy, anything else you want to say to the people?
Let's go 1-0 this week.
1-0, whether it's by 1 point or 100. It won't be 100. 1-0. Joe, you got anything else you want to say to the people?
No, let's just get it. Big week ahead, starting the first of 4 that are meaningful, get bowl eligible, and let's, get ready for the next. But yeah, take care of business against Baylor on Saturday. Rain or shine, let's just get it done.
Absolutely. I think the next 2 games are important to beat the teams you're supposed to beat. Home against Baylor, at TCU. Those are 2 teams that are middling, struggling, bumbling, all the descriptive verbs there. You got to take care of what you're supposed to take care of. You're going to be favored in both of those games. You got right now for this Baylor game, we are 6.5-point favorites on most lines. I think there's even DraftKings has us at 7-point favorite. Take care of business. I don't care if you listen. These both Jeremy and Joe think we're going to cover. I don't matter. Just win. Just win, baby. JWB. And so win this game, win the next one. Then the path is right in front of you in that game against Iowa State, and we'll get to that when we do. But before we get there, you got to take care of business first and foremost. So for the Red Raider expert, that is Joe Lopez. For the People's Champ, Jeremy Gillen, this is your boy, I'll Be Sure. And you have been listening to the Tortillas and Takes podcast, part of the 1012 Network. As always, stay right, people.